It's been a minute since I've done a stinger video. I do a whole lot of work and not a whole lot of playing. But I've had a lot of time lately, a couple of months actually, after I got in a bit of an accident and broke some bones. So I started working on the stinger again, although this garage is about 110 degrees all the time, hence the fan in the background. But just to go over some of the cool things, in case somebody likes some ideas or some thought process here. Had JB4 on it before. Was running the old map 6, whatever the heck that was called at the time, full methanol map with little custom boost curves and all that other good stuff. So removed the JB4, full ECU tune, full TCU tune, keeping it simple. Not worried about logging, could care less. I do have a custom methanol system on here, some people may remember this. It is a low-high setup, so this initial one here, this has a different nozzle than this one does. This size is much smaller than that one is, so this one pretty much runs full time as long as there's around 2 pounds of boost, and it tapers up to about 8. And then after that, this one kicks it around 5-6 and tapers out to the stockish levels of around 14 for full flow. So that is your typical BM12 nozzle that you would get in the kit. This one on the other hand is a custom size. I can't share what that is because I don't want people to install something like this and go, well, he used it, he led me on the wrong path. That's something you'll have to figure out on your own. But that is your low nozzle, that is your high nozzle. As you can see, dual injection. I went through and I removed all the EWG wires, removed the stupid fuel wires and all that other crap. I'll work on logging later, but just the sheer effort to get all this crap back in here. So this yellow wire might look a little precarious there. It actually gets covered 97% of the way from about here that way. It gets covered with the engine cover. I just don't have that on there right now. So that is your oil pump feed line reference. So that tells the internal instrument how much oil pressure you have, what level the oil pump's on. And then there's a blue line right there, and it runs up through here. This is your boost line. So that again also feeds to the inside. And then we've got this new setup. So before there used to be a giant JB4 here and a whole bunch of other, basically just shit crammed underneath that little vanity cover so nobody could see it. But I've went through here, and although it might look a little messy to some people, this wire right here I'm actually working on. I just turned the car on for the first time in several days from having the battery disconnected in order to do all this electrical work without possibly setting the car and my house on fire. So this one here actually powers a USB adapter inside that powers the panel pilot, which is a PLC to control all the stuff. So got the lines all fed through here, got some power lines, these are ground distributions and positives and all that other good jazz. So then it runs back here to this spaghetti shit show. So we have dual injection in here, obviously. Used to have the BMS with the FSB. You can save your thoughts and theories on how one's safer than the other. They can both fail, they can both screw you over, so it doesn't really matter. These are all the previous lines I had here. I had quite a few spares. There's several lines between the custom door handles and the custom programming for the audio and all that other crap. There's a whole bunch of lines underneath this cover that go to freaking everything, basically. And then added to that nest. Now, that's all temporary. That's because when you install something like this and you're the kind of person I am, I never tuck anything away until it's finally done, because as soon as you tuck it away, something won't work and it'll be something stupid. So that's meth pump 2, that's meth pump 1, that's a low, that's a high, and then it feeds up there. There's a bunch of wires on the body control module and everything else that tie in for the door lights, because the front door handles are all smart handles and the rear door handles are not smart handles, but they are now because why not? Now, my favorite part is this bad mamma jamma. Now the gloss, it just is what it is because there's a light on the front of this phone. In real life, you can't really see any of that glare at all. So this, a lot of people have asked about it. It is a Lascar Panel Pilot SGD43A. In short, it's a computer-ish. You can program it to do all sorts of stuff if you know how to do it. This is not an OBD2 adapter thing where you just kind of plug her in and cool stuff pops up. This is all custom done, so every bit of this was done. There you go. You can see I went with like an oil slick background to kind of match the car. Every bit of this is done by hand, so every one of these graphics that you see here had to be put in here by me. So what I did was I put controls up here so we can turn things on and off. We have pump 1, pump 2. Say you get into a low fluid type of scenario and you need to shut the pumps off, or I don't want them on because of some other thing, I have the option to shut them off. So you just do a click button, and you see there, now we've got one on. And then obviously you can click that, shut it back off. I also have control of the sub amplifier. I just redid the install on that. Hooked the stock subs back to their stock amp, and then added a secondary sub that I've had sitting here in the house. Some people may know this. I used to be really big into audio. I had a SA8 V2 sitting on the shelf for about 9 years, and I wish that was a joke, but it's been sitting there, so I finally got a box for it. Something simple, tuned 32, works perfect, adds just enough audio. Used the old amp that used to be $80 and is now $200, so that works really well. On this side here, we have oil pressure, so it's flashing right now because the car's not on. Anything underneath a safe level, it will flash like that. Otherwise, it'll show obviously a digit of the PSI. And then on this side, we have the actual boost PSI, and that goes from 0 to 25, mainly because anything over 20 PSI, you're asking for trouble with these really shitty turbos to begin with. Down here, we have indicators of the pump 1 and pump 2. I think that's a friggin' 3. It is a 3. Yeah, that's a nice typo. I'll have to fix that. So, pump 1, pump 2, that indicates whether or not it's on or off. And if it's on, is there an error? If there's an error, it'll say pump error, which is real ingenious. So, the voltage reference on the bottom, underneath the percentage of methanol flow, is for me while I do my tuning on it, to get the ratios correct. That way I can look at the reference voltage that it's using later on. Now, you can see there's a little caveat there in the middle that says legal. It's more of a funny, because I just can't help myself. If the boost goes above about 14 PSI, it says something to the effect of felony loading, or just loading, but in red text. And then after that, it just switches to felony once you hit 18 PSI, so that you can try to remember to keep your driver's license and not get the car towed. So, that's there. I've got a video on that at some point here with all this stuff functioning. It's kind of hard to tell, but there's a black shader ring just above that little thin line on all of these. Similar to the big bars on this one, and they move with the flow, and then it shows obviously a digital number to kind of give you an idea of what the flow rate is. So if you make a quick reference to it, if you look at it real quick, you can do that. Side note, some people also remember this, I did the navigation and the screen upgrade / figure out how to do that so other people could do it. I bought this thing from eBay, and I have had free XM radio for the last probably 2 or 3 years. I don't know whose account it is or what happened, but somewhere there was a loss in translation, and I still have free XM. Never once paid for it, wouldn't pay for it anyways because it sucks, but that's kind of cool. Still got my sweet little purple button over here, and it does change colors with the mood lighting. I know people still get pissed off about that, but if everybody wants to ruin the stuff, then I can't make them for people. Then obviously we got the Supervision cluster. I still have another one of those available. Still got the Snow White Pearl matched rings on there. But let's go look at the back and see what's going on there. Alright, so obviously we're in the rear now. Just got done tearing all the shit out again. And that's because that little guy didn't want to function, which was fine and dandy. Nothing like some problem solving. So there's a wire that feeds from the front, from the PLC control that comes back here, that sends an input on the relay board to turn on a 12 volt, which turns on the remote, which turns on the amp. The amp didn't come on, didn't have voltage there, had to trace it back. Turns out I just mixed up the input and output on one of the PLC programming things where you designate which input and output you're using, so that was easy. But this is your board, so I custom made this enclosure. It's got a cool little stinger logo. Ooh, fancy. So I made that, and it's got some distribution blocks so that you can do a handover between the two different kinds of wires. You can see a little voltage thing there. It's very humid in here, but here's a little diagram of what all we got going on there. And I do have a spare channel still in case I had something in the future. But that relay board in and of itself is a 5 volt supply board, so it needs 5 volts in. However, the car does not run on 5 volts because it's not a giant USB. This thing here takes 12 volts, turns it into 5. That's also important because in order to trigger these relays, they use a little optocoupler with some transistors and stuff, and that's triggered between 3.3 and 5 volt for Arduino purposes, and the outputs on the last car panel pilot are 3.3. Therefore, you can make it work in the car. So it's got its feeds, and then they're all 12 volt positive commons in the middles, and then the normally open side is your trigger out, so that if it fails in the off position. You've got one that goes to one pump, you got one that goes to the other pump, you got one that goes to the amp. This little guy down here is yet another board, but this is a 12 volt triggering board. That powers off of the amplifier signal from there to turn on, but since we can't use a signal that is a turn on to power big things, we have to use a relay. So you got a feeder coming in here, turns on the relay, power comes out, and it gets distributed between the that to the board, and this one, shoot, I don't even know. What does it say? 4-channel. So that goes to the 4-channel. 4-channel's on all the time. Bass amp's the only one that I really wanted to be optional. Could I run a bass remote? Yeah, but if anybody remembers, that cute little guy about the size of a Pepsi can does not come with a bass remote. So, oh well. I've still got the Betty White stickers on there from when I had the Air Ride install, so that's pretty cool. But, yeah, it's all pretty good. Generally speaking, it's all done. It's taken me a lot longer than it probably should have. All these wires might not make sense to you and look disorganized. It makes sense to me, and since I own the car, it kind of works out. I'll have to get everything back in here, because like I said, I just took all this crap out. So what I do is I take that foam piece and the spare tire and all that other stuff out. I have roadside, so I really don't care. And I take a piece of, I think it's 1/2-inch plywood, and I've actually got it so that it bolts underneath this ledge here, and then it flattens across there, and it ends right there where that little divot is, and it actually creates a firm shelf, and then I can put things on it without having to worry about it sagging, because obviously there's no support below it. And then I've got it situated so that the sub box goes in the corner. A long time ago I used to do audio, as I mentioned, and I originally designed these little box brace things. Not that it's going to focus because it's so blasted hot in here, but that just goes in the corner and it holds it up there in that corner port on this side so that it resonates to my side on the driver's, since I'm listening to it and not the passenger. And then methanol tank kind of situates over here, the line runs over there, and then got a nice little valve so I can shut it off. But once I get everything running, I'll have to check it out. I'll show you how the gauges work and how everything functions.